Imagine, just for a second, a world totally without screens. No phones, no paper, nothing. A world where the survival of your entire culture, your history, your very identity, depends absolutely on the breath in your lungs and the words you speak. Pretty wild, right? Well, that is the raw, undeniable power of the spoken word. Welcome to this explainer on the spoken truth of India's orality and folklore. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the power of the spoken word, explore the 3 types of orality, dive deep into Kumawani folklore up in the north, uncover Ramanujan's tales down in the south, and then wrap things up with preserving our oral heritage. Let's get going. Section 1. The power of the spoken word and why spoken stories actually survive. Consider for a moment how information manages to survive across centuries without a single hard drive, cloud server, or even a scrap of paper to back it up. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the answer lies right here in this staggering number, 1,652. That is the number of mother tongues in India, 1,652. Yet, out of all these distinct, unique speech varieties, only 15, just 15, are read or written by 95% of the population. So what about the rest? Well, the vast, overwhelming majority of these languages live exclusively in the air. They're spoken in village squares, tribal huts, and wayside tea shops. So, how do these countless cultures actually preserve their history if they aren't writing it down? The answer is oral literature. This is deeply rooted in the ancient Smriti-Shruti tradition, which is basically the method of verbally passing down shared cultural experiences and a sort of nonlinear history from one generation right to the next. And to be clear, it's far more than just casual storytelling. It's a vital, living tool for preserving a community's very existence, its traditions, and those fascinating alternative histories that honestly rarely ever make it into our conventional textbooks. All right, moving to Section 2, the 3 types of orality, breaking down how we communicate. So, not all spoken words function exactly the same way in human history. To really get this, we have to look at how technology has jumped into the mix. First up, we have primary orality. These are cultures completely untouched by writing, like zero text. Spoken sound is literally the only way to retain wisdom. Then, right in the middle, we have secondary orality. This is the high-tech culture we live in today, where our oral communication is actually sustained by television, radio, and gadgets that ultimately depend on writing to even function. And finally, residual orality. These are cultures that have been exposed to print and modern tech, but they fiercely, and I mean fiercely, retain their ancient oral roots in their everyday lives. To truly grasp the sheer survival power of primary orality, picture a hunter out in the wild. If he sees a lion way off in the distance, he can kind of choose to ignore it, right? It's just a passive object in his field of vision. But if he hears a lion roaring right nearby, he has to act instantly. Sound signals immediate presence and immediate power. In a primary oral culture, human speech shares that exact same life or death power. You can't just gloss over a spoken word the way you might ignore a flyer on a bulletin board. It commands your most basic, primal instincts. Which actually brings us to this super fascinating, almost counterintuitive warning from Socrates. He said, "Writing is inhuman. It attempts to turn living thoughts, dwelling in the human mind, into mere objects in the physical world." Let that sink in. Socrates fiercely resisted literate technologies because he believed speech is an inherently oral event based on real human relationships. It completely challenges our modern reliance on written text, and it kind of begs the question, what do we lose when we stop talking and just start typing? Section 3, North India, specifically Kumani folklore, and the myths of the Himalayas. To transition from these broad academic concepts into some concrete stories, we have to look at the absolutely vital work of Dr. Prabha Pant. She realized that these oral traditions were getting deeply endangered in our computer age. So, she took it upon herself to travel through the rugged Kumaon hills, literally sitting down with village elders and collecting over 100 folktales, just to preserve this incredibly rich, multi-layered cultural fabric. So the crucial point is how these tales weave together the human and the divine. Take the immortal, albeit tragic, love story of Gangnath Devda. It kicks off with Prince Gangnath having this profound, life-altering dream of a woman named Bayana. He straight up leaves his cushy royal life behind, journeys as an ascetic all the way to Almora, and they reunite. But, and there's always a but, their love angers the royals and they are brutally murdered on the festival of Holi. In her dying breath, Bayana curses the entire village with destruction. But the story doesn't just end in blood. Through a traditional ritual, the villagers seek forgiveness, and Gorakhnath, showing divine mercy, actually pardons them, becoming deified as a god of justice. It is just a gripping narrative about love, heavy sacrifice, and the ultimate power of forgiveness. Let's look at another classic, The Test of Muya. In this one, a desperately poor boy and his grandmother share their absolute last pieces of roti with a couple of strangers who, surprise, turn out to be a disguised Shiva and Parvati. In return for this extreme hospitality, the gods give the boy magic ash to heal the local leper king. But here is the brilliant twist. When the healed king offers the boy literally any reward he wants, the goddess Saraswati seizes the boy's tongue, forcing him to ask for the princess's hand in marriage. I love this one because it perfectly illustrates how deep, complex themes like poverty, hospitality, and divine intervention are taught to generations through these incredibly charming, relatable stories. But, not all folk tales have happy, magical endings. Take the dialects of animals and birds. It's a much darker, serious cautionary tale. A newlywed wife understands the hidden languages of jackals and crows, which actually leads her to find hidden gold. But her husband, suspicious and completely uncomprehending of her late-night wanderings, tragically murders her out of misplaced distrust. It's a stark, really fascinating reflection of the precarious social dynamics and gender relations that are so deeply embedded in these ancient stories. All right, moving on to Section 4, South India, Ramanujan's Tales, and Keeping the Village Awake. Shifting our focus all the way down to the southern part of the subcontinent, we meet the renowned scholar and folklorist A.K. Ramanujan. His deep dive into the oral traditions of the region proved something incredibly important. He showed that these regional stories are not just spontaneous, unstructured babble. Not at all. They are highly formal, interconnected pieces of literature with very distinct, purposeful designs. Ramanujan discovered what is basically a complete ecosystem of thought. He classified these South Indian oral tales into specific categories: male-centered, women-centered, tales about families, fate, and demons, humorous gestures, animal tales, and even, get this, meta-narratives, which are literally stories about stories. It just shows this massive, comprehensive framework that addresses pretty much every single facet of human existence. Now, this completely reframes our modern understanding of fairy tales. Ramanujan noted that folktales aren't just designed to put children to sleep. Actually, scratch that. It's the exact opposite. They were often ingeniously designed to keep adults awake. Imagine farmers guarding their crops through long, grueling, pitch-black nights, or workers slicing areca nuts for hours on end. These gripping, complex stories were basically their caffeine. It kept them alert and engaged when their livelihoods literally depended on it. How cool is that? Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Preserving Our Oral Heritage, the Collective Memory. So why does the preservation of these spoken stories even matter to us today? Well, because no single individual owns a folktale. It is the collective heritage of a whole society. Storytellers are constantly altering and adapting characters to suit local tastes, which means these stories act as a living, breathing alternative history of the people. They aren't locked away in dusty palaces or elite institutions. No, they live in the kitchens, out in the fields, and around the wayside tea shops. They are the true democratic voice of the community. And that leads us to this final, pretty provocative question. As our 1,652 mother tongues continue to fade into the modern digital age, what living thoughts will turn into mere physical objects forever? Remember Socrates' warning about writing? If we lose the spoken word, we lose that vital, living human connection and the vibrant history behind it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope this structured journey through India's oral history has sparked your curiosity. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.